Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist here in Georgia, and it is time for the TT Time with Dr. Tarver. Is a wellness-based podcast that is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. Welcome to August, everyone. We took a much needed break in July to get some rest, and so we are super excited about this August series, Getting Back. And our first guest tonight is going to be phenomenal as we kick that series off. So we're talking about getting back to pastoral self-care with our returning guest, Reverend Stephen Garrett. Reverend Stephen Garrett is a resident of Montgomery, Alabama, and a powerhouse speaker, passionate entrepreneur, and pastor. Using the Pulpit View Podcast, he speaks internationally on mental health, conflict resolution, and tools for a blessed, intentional work-life balance. He is also the senior pastor of the Bethlehem Missionary Baptist Church in Phoenix City, Alabama, where he has served for the past 8 years. He is happily married to his wife, Christina, for 16 beautiful years of bliss, and they are the homeschooling parents of 5 awesome children. Welcome back to the show, Reverend Garrett.
It is my pleasure to be here.
Whoop, whoop. All right, we got a lot to get to. You know, I packed way too many questions in less than an hour, but we're going to do our best to try to navigate and give some people some good information. So as I was setting up for this podcast, I posted some statistics, and I'll just highlight them really quickly. These come from the Schaefer Institute. 70% of pastors constantly fight depression. 71% describe feeling burned out. 80% believe pastoral ministry has negatively affected their families. And 70% report they don't have a close friend. And I know that there are a lot of, I think, misperceptions about being a pastor. And I think sometimes it's misinformed because of what we see on social media, because of how we assume pastors are living. We put a lot into what we see pastors driving and wearing and the size of their congregations. So let's dispel some myths. What are actually some of the things that pastors are responsible for in churches? Let's just talk to the people about what your everyday looks like.
So we are, I hate to say it this way, but in many ways, many pastors are playing referee. We are balancing problems. Our goal, our hope is to be a vision caster in the church and to be leading. But I tell people, although the text does not directly deal with the church, when Moses in Exodus is leading the people of God, you almost believe they are a Baptist church because there's always an argument to bring down. And so, ironically, as you were talking about the myth, my daughter has a friend, and her friend asked her the other day, when the offering is taken up, does your dad take some of the money? And so, and she said, I don't know, I guess so, because he gets a check. I said, no, Daddy doesn't see that offering. I said, the only thing I'm told is the numbers, and Pastor, we're doing good, or Pastor, we're not doing so good. And our job is to manage the chaos. It is to help direct the people in their hardest moments, to be present with them in their broken states. And sometimes it is to be a surrogate father or surrogate mother, depending on, but it is to step in a place where our job is to lead them to Christ, as we are also kind of helping them navigate through culture and the chaos that we have in our today's society. So our job is very little. It's like you've seen Law and Order. It's always glamorous to watch the detective, but I have friends that are detectives and lawyers, and they tell me, listen, don't believe Law and Order. Those are the rare cases. You don't get the excitement. The most of our work is reading, studying, and speaking. That excitement doesn't really happen. So what we see on TV, I think they said something like 85% of pastors are bivocational. 1% as of 2015, there may be recent numbers, actually make over $80,000. And so one of the struggles with pastors in dispelling the rumors are a lot of what we see come from a pastor's bivocational job, not from the church. And so,
you're going to have to speak on that, sir. So first of all, let me just go back because I like to roll the beautiful bean footage and remind people of what you just said, a very important statistic. Less than 1% of pastors make what?
over $80,000.
Okay.
Now that was as a, in
that
2000,
was 2015.
Yeah, 2015. And I want to say in
Mm-hmm.
2015, it was 16. The most recent statistic that I saw was 2016, and it was 80,000. But that was
Okay.
a year different, so I didn't want to really
quote that per se.
Yeah.
But I do think that that's important because one, I think I don't want to assume anything about the audience. So I want you to break down bivocational for me, because I think a lot of people don't understand that pastors actually usually have another job outside of being a pastor. Because pastoring, sometimes, as we look at that stat of less than 1% make 80,000, is not enough actually to cover the needs of the family.
Yeah.
And two, to go back to your daughter's friend, that the church is not funding your lifestyle, if you will, because I think that is also a misperception that people have. So break that down for us, Reverend Garrett.
So for over 20 years, I've been pastoring now 15. I'm getting ready to actually going on 16. I'm celebrating my 9th anniversary in 2 weeks. And so altogether, it's been 16 years, 20 out of the years that I've been pastoring. So I got 4 years before pastoring. I was a barbershop owner, recently retired last year. Now, what many assumed was, oh, he's retiring. Either, here it is, I had folk that thought I was leaving my church because they said, we know that they cannot financially replace what the barbershop was doing. Or people thought something amazing had happened at my church and I was getting ready to take on the role. Just because I retired from the barbershop business did not mean I retired from business.
From business.
And so one of the things that a lot of people misconceive about pastors are we have the affordability to just have regular jobs by the whim, because we are called. Many of our pastors are small town pastors, especially in National Baptist Church. I think it's like 60% of the Baptists and National Baptists are rural pastors. So with that being said, those pastors are pastoring places where you might get a call at 2 a.m. in the morning. I've gotten calls at 2 a.m. I've gotten calls on vacation time, and I'm expected to leave. Well, you know, this is being employed. I, at a regular 9 to 5, I cannot just get up and tell them, oh, I have a member sick. One of my sheep are sick. I got to go see about them. I don't get to say that. And so many pastors are working more entrepreneurship jobs, or they have a structure in place that they can work a traditional job. But the reality is they always have to make some concessions. Prime example, many pastors in the National Baptist, one of the things that they started doing, and a lot of people, I probably shouldn't say this, I don't want to get no pastors in trouble.
Don't get anybody in trouble.
A lot of our trips, one of our particular trips were set up really for pastors and pastors' wives to take a break. So what they do is when we're going to register, it is a time that they try to minimize the sessions because they understand that many pastors are taking time off of their regular job to be there.
To go,
And truth of the matter is, your job does not care why you're taking the time off. It's
no, they do not.
Vacation time. And so bivocational, basically, to just sum it up, you are working a job while you're responsible for your calling.
And I think that's important for people to understand, because I know that and things have gotten better. So I grew up primarily in Methodist, AME, CME, in that family. And one of the things that I learned is like pastors weren't actually getting insurance.
Yeah.
Right. So there isn't, we talk to people a lot of times about what happens when you get sick. Like you're over there nurturing sickness now, right? The family is spreading germs as families do, right? And so what happens when I get sick? If the church is my only source of income and I don't have any health benefits, or I don't have any life insurance benefits, or I don't have any retirement benefits, as you talked about, some of these rural churches or even some of the smaller churches, some churches are connectional, some churches are not. And so we're really trying to manage everything in its place. And so often I learned that pastors were taking on other jobs to be able to get benefits so that they can make sure that they could take care of themselves and their families.
Yeah. And so even with that, when you look at many pastors, a lot of pastors work in the insurance business. And the reason they work in the insurance business is because it allows them to offset some of that. And so the struggle that I think a lot have is they assume that when you see, and I'm not throwing nobody under the bus, but I'm just thinking because he's right now one of the more well-known pastors out. You see the Jamal Bryant's that is speaking all over the place, driving this and doing this, that the pastor in the rural town is a smaller version of that. I remember a friend of mine said, man, I thought you were going to be a mini TD Jakes. You're pastoring a regular sized church. What's going on? I said, I don't know, talk to God. So, and the reality is, many of us, we don't. I remember several times as a pastor, and then there's the pride aspect. What I'm getting ready to say is a pride aspect. I was preaching and I was in pain. I'm talking about toothache. I had an abscess one time, cracked tooth another time, and I had to wait because the business I owned was entrepreneurship, and this is before Obamacare. So it wasn't nothing out there really to help me at the time. So I had to save the money up to get it fixed. And a lot of people say, well, why don't you tell your church? But here's the problem. We also deal with the ridicule that comes from needing. So we have a balance that we have to take of, I don't want to use it until I really need it. And a toothache may not be good enough to do it. And so we have to really balance. When I got hit by the car in 2016, walking across the street, there was this pride level, and that was on me. And I think we talked about this before, but there was a pride level on me that I had to be there because I had been talking to them about faithfulness. I had been talking to them. But during that time, and I've been there long enough, just to be honest, during that time, my church was not as present as I would have hoped they would have been because I was out of work for two months. And I'm at an entrepreneurship job. It was other pastors that came to my aid and blessed me through that time and that season. And so my church did some things, but it was one of those assumptions, oh, well, the pastor is well taken care of. I discovered during that time, even my members thought I was making more, even though there was some information given out beforehand. So we have to struggle. And one of the biggest reasons we get jobs, and you are correct, is because there are these benefits that we know we need to operate on a daily basis. And so you'll have a pastor, and then we have to get a job that is understanding of our other commitment. And that is, for most pastors, that is a challenge because you may have the job that's paying you $60,000 a year. You need them to be understanding of the job that's only paying you below a teacher salary a year. And it's hard to tell the job that is paying all the bills.
Right. Giving you the benefits.
And the benefits that I can't be there because I have a member that has passed, or I have to go to a meeting that's in the daytime instead of the nighttime. And my church wants me to be involved. So those are the balances that we have to manage.
That is a good, nice segue into all of the aspects of being a pastor, right? You mentioned this piece about, like, I didn't feel like this warranted enough of a level for me to go to you all and tell you, right? And so even just that, because one of the things that I heard growing up, and actually I would even say into my early 20s probably, was that pastors are supposed to make sacrifices. Right? So you're supposed to be in poverty. You're supposed to be out here hurting. You trusting and believing in God, and you telling everybody to be faithful. So you should be out here struggling. And it sounds like there was even some buy-in from now. Nowhere else would we encourage that. We wouldn't encourage our kids. Like, baby, you got an abscess. You got hit by a car. Nobody is gonna say, hey, you need to be up in that pulpit Sunday, right? Nobody would do that. But with pastors, there is this misperception that, okay, you say you're called. All right, then, all right, God, come on, show up then. Handle that. If you're, yeah.
I think here it is. And I have grace for those who's possibly said that. And here's the reason why. They come from a different era. They come from a different era. The men, when I grew up, did not whine, did not complain. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm just saying in their mindset, this is a burden you have to carry. We're talking about men that they were taken out of school and told they got a farm because the family has to eat. So their mindset is different than possibly our mindset, because they understood that at this time, it's just a responsibility that you have as a man. But then you also have to manage the people. And that's the best way to say it. I remember when I first got to Bethlehem, my wife was, and boy, I'm sharing a lot. My wife was pregnant.
That's what I do to people.
One of the elders, elder statesmen, I was asking him to keep it quiet, don't tell nobody. And because we just found out she was pregnant. And he says in front of the whole church, they're coming with a baby. She got one. And I remember overhearing one of the members say, oh, he's going to expect us to take care of that baby too. That sits in your soul.
Yeah.
Now, when someone wants to do something for me, and I know this is an influential person within our congregation that is talking amongst them and causing some negative responses, that and all you hear in many of the churches is that the pastor's about the money. So when you have a pastor that's being treated well, I remember a pastor friend of mine told me the reason he wasn't retiring yet was because his church asked him not to. Here's the thing, because it took them so long to be a blessing to him.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And so here's you have to manage that. And the belief system is, my wife asked me this one day, why are pastors martyrs? Didn't Jesus do enough dying? And I'm paraphrasing how
Come on, sis. Absolutely.
But here was my rebuttal. Why are mothers? And she said, those are our babies. It's different. I said, that's how we feel. We feel when we're called to it, there's a deeper connection to it. I said, and just like a mom, and I'm not saying it's exactly the same, but I am saying there is a sense of I owe them my best.
Yeah. And
you have to break away from that place of thinking that giving my best to someone means taking my best away from myself.
Absolutely.
And so we had to understand that for her as a mom, but she had to help me walk through to understand that for me as a pastor. That there were some decisions I had to make that may be better for me, but it's so I can pastor them better and not be so expended. So
absolutely. Depleted. Not at a cost to me.
Yeah.
I'm a servant, but not at a cost to depleting myself and depleting my family. And we're going to get into that in a bit. So we have a question in the chat, right? Because how do we break away from this? So one of the things that I would argue for mothers is that there are other mothers that will say, hey, baby, you got to take care of you. This is why they tell you on the airplane to put your mask on first. And when I ask people, they will say, you put the mask on the kids first. I said, and then when you pass out, what's going to happen to that kid?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
It has always been you put the mask on first because you got to take care of you in order to take care of them. Right. So how do we change this? The question was, what advice do you have for younger pastors particularly those who are raising kids, who have families, want to change this perception that we have to deplete ourselves, that I got to show up even though I got hit by a car, that I got to show up even though I got an abscess, that I am allowed to be able to ask people to support me, that I don't have to bear all of this burden simply because I'm in servant leadership, because I also need to model for you all to take good care of you. So what's the balance? What would your advice be?
A couple of things. One of the major things, there's two books that I love.
Okay.
No, three. Take the Day Off by Robert Morris,
Ooh.
which is a phenomenal book. I implore anyone to read that book. Dangerous Calling by Paul David Tripp, I do believe. Another good book. And then God, why am I forgetting the last book? Because it's one of my favorite books out of all of them. But it's by Gordon MacDonald. And I'll when I think of the book, because it's on the tip of my tongue, I'll remember. Okay. In all three of the books, he talks about how in all three of the books, they talk about the necessity of letting God be God, but also partnering people that can handle it, right? And so I remember a moment, and this is to answer the question, I remember a moment in my ministry where I was really at the worst place that I could possibly be. And that was, I understood it. I understood how pastors could give up, how pastors could say, yes, I'm not good enough. I comprehended that. And it was hard for me because overall, I just thought that pastors, Lord's going to rain down the power of heaven in your life. And the book is Ordering Your Private World. Ordering Your Private World. By Gordon MacDonald. So one day I am driving and this was a thought that came through my head. I said, if I have an accident, and I've never told anyone this full story but my wife. If I have an accident, I'm not trying to kill myself. I just want to be in the hospital because nobody can bother me. And that was the thought in my process. I'd been in an accident already, got hit by a car. My father had died. So October, hit by the car. December 26th, my father was rushed to the hospital, and New Year's Day, he dies. Oh, wow. February, my father in ministry is rushed to the hospital, and he is on his deathbed. And then there's problems within the church. And I said to myself, if I can just be at peace a little bit. And so I say something to pastors. Make sure that your spouse understands how to give you a lifesaver. So my wife knew me well enough to see that I was operating out of place. And so what she did, she searched for a pastor's counselor. And she was like, just give him a call. And I was like, she said, we need you more than the church. And I sat there and talked to him, and just expending a lot of that stuff that I was going through, trauma that I experienced that I didn't realize I had experienced, being mad at people that I didn't realize I was mad at, preaching in my pain. I realized that I was keeping people that wanted to help from helping. So my answer to how do you with kids, first of all, in Ordering Your Private World, one day he has this busy schedule, and his wife tells him, because he's been busy all week, he has not seen his family all week due to the schedule. And she says, listen, before you leave, tell your children goodbye because they hadn't seen their daddy all week. And he says he just breaks down. He cries all day. His wife sends the kids to the neighbor, ministers with him. And that goes into Dangerous Calling. Paul David Tripp says, every shepherd needs a shepherd. Now that can be your pastor, or that can be a member that you know, here it is. And I ain't saying go tell everything to every member, But that can be somebody that you know that when you talk to, that they have a genuine care for you and you manage what you give them. And then here's take the day off. You cannot be at everything. There's sometimes we have to let God be God. And what my pastor used to tell me, he'd say, Garrett, there are some issues that only God can fix. And as long as you have your hand in it, he's not going to do anything with it. So what I would tell any young pastor is to step back before you try to handle the situation. It will be there tomorrow. Get your rest. Don't cancel your vacation. I have a rule in my house. My wife thought I was playing until this year. I had a lot of preaching engagements going into the beginning of the year. One of my dear members passed, and it happened, her funeral happened to only be able to be done on my wife's birthday. I promised my wife when I took this church, there were 2 things she would not have to share. That was our anniversary, unless it fell on Sunday, and her birthday. So it's a Wednesday, and usually I take that Wednesday off. So this time she said, I understand, babe, there's nothing you can do about it. I know you love her. I loved her. We're going to be there. I called some of my deacons up because I had to cancel the plans on Wednesday. And I said, I won't be there on the 3rd Sunday. I won't be there on the 2nd Sunday. Some of my members were upset with me. I explained to them, my wife didn't want me to have to do it. I said, if I start breaking these promises now, then what's going to end up happening, they'll always be disposable. So what I cannot do is allow, and since you had to give up your day, they're going to have to give up their day. Doesn't make me any less holy because I did preach this Sunday.
Come on, saints.
I have a responsibility to shepherd my family as well as I have a responsibility to shepherd my church. And I tell people this before, because I can run on that one all day. I tell people this: God never called us to care. And when I say care, I mean to manage his people. He called us to shepherd them. This is what I mean when I say that. I am not their God. I am not the person that is there to solve every problem. I am there to point them to the problem solver. I think sometimes preachers carry a role of shepherd and not under shepherd. I am an under shepherd, but I am called to shepherd my kids, my wife. I am there to make sure that I am pouring out into them. I got to pour out to both, but one is his bride. And I think many of us as pastors, we are in danger of committing adultery with someone else's wife in the church. And what I mean when I say that, before someone takes it out of context, the bride of the church is a bride of Christ. It is not my responsibility to be there for everything for the church. My job is to make sure that I am there to be there for the things they cannot handle on their own and to point them to Christ until they can handle it with Christ.
Now, you have really spoken, I think, to a lot of the frustration that I frequently hear from families about, I feel like I don't have my father. I feel like I don't have my spouse. I feel like I don't have my mother, because it does feel like the church has become more of a priority to them, and we're always getting put on the back burner. So I can appreciate you speaking to, there has to be some boundaries, but there also has to be a shift in philosophy, because if you feel like you have to be available for everything, then you'll end up not being available for anything. So let's talk about some of that burden, some of that trying to figure out that balance. I won't necessarily, burden's probably not the right word, but I will say trying to figure out that balance of, as you said, not ending up committing adultery, if you will, because I have over prioritized one wife and under prioritized another. Yes.
So I lost the word from balance, and the only reason I lost the word from balance because I don't think you'll never really have a balanced life. I honestly do not believe you'll have a balanced life. I believe you'll have your priorities in order.
Okay.
And so here's the reason I say that. Balancing is something is going to, When something tips the scale, the other is going to feel bad. When we set boundaries in, I am there for my children. My children are allowed to ask me questions. I don't care what meeting I'm in. If I am in a business meeting and they call me, they know I'm in a business meeting ahead of schedule. So if they call me, I know it's important. I'm taking that call. I don't feel any type of way. My kids feel their priority. One of the things we did when I would go to conventions, I did not, and this is probably negative, so pastors don't follow this rule, but I did it because God had to work on my pride before he could help me work others. I would not let the church take care of my family, except for my wife. Here's the reason why. Because when we got there, I told my wife and my kids to go enjoy themselves. Gave them money. I told them to do what you want to do, because I never wanted them to feel the burden of my church asking, what did you do while you were there? My wife had full permission to say it was none of your business. Why? Because the church said
y'all didn't pay for it.
I was there at the conference. They were there enjoying themselves. And when the conference was over, they got daddy's time. So my kids did not look at conference time as a time to be away from daddy, a time that something was taking daddy. They would get to the point where they say, Daddy, when do you have to go to another conference? We hadn't been in Tripp in a long time. And so it became an exciting moment for them, because they started to understand that this does not have to be something taken from you. It can be something given to you. And so that was prioritizing, making sure things are in proper order. And what we do a lot of times, let me say this, I can't say other preachers, I can say myself. I got to a point where I was preparing for sermons. My private time with God was sermon prep. My private time was praying over problems. It was not, I repeat, it was not my personal devotion with God. My private time, and I got to that point, a lot of what I learned came from failure, where I thought, oh, me and my wife spent the whole day together Wednesday. She had to help me one day and say, baby, you're at Bible study. That's not a date. Like, that is not a date. I don't care how you phrase this. I don't care how much time we have together. The reason we are together is because you are at Bible study and we decided to leave with you. This is not a date. And when I started to understand these little nuances, which I'm not perfect at either yet, I started setting boundaries. That what happened was they started saying, okay, I know I'm important. So now when he has to make a change, I am more receptive to the change because he's prioritized. And I have enough sweat equity to say, hey, the reason I took my wife to see Drew Hill for that weekend that I was supposed to be at church instead of to repay her for giving up her time was not just because I wanted to take my wife. It was because down the line, if by chance it comes up, well, I had to give up, here's the sweat equity. Look at what I've done. I need you to see that you did not lose your position. And so that's one of the key things. I think balancing, making sure that your personal health, mental health is there first. Making sure, because you can't, like you said, can't put the mask on the child and then pass out. The other child's going to die. Might get it on one, but I'm not going to be able to get it on the second. And so I got to make sure I'm together. Then I got to make sure my family structure is together, because when I come back home from a bad church meeting, which I don't have many of them, but when I come back home, I need my wife to be in a place. That's one of the greatest reasons I am happy. I'm not telling anybody else that is a co-ministry. They have a co-ministry marriage. We have it in our own way, but I am so happy my wife does not share the pulpit with me, because when we talk about problems, they're really the church. There are other instances. So I get to shut the church down when I come home and have just genuine, organic conversation about how her day was. How did she change the world and impact the world? She talks to me, and now we've discovered something. So when I come home from the church, my family structure, because it's taken care of, I'm better for them.
I love that. And I heard you say a couple of things, so I want to kind of go back. One, you had mentioned pride. quite a few times, and how pride has interfered with you maybe making some of the healthier decisions that you can make. But you also talked about this, some people I wouldn't ask for help. I've set up my family structure so that my family feels prioritized, but I've been very careful about who else I added. I recognize that for some people, they don't actually have a support system in ministry. You alluded to this a little bit earlier when you said you get in that dark place where pastors are feeling suicidal. We know that the suicide rate in pastors has increased, and is often correlated to a bunch of things: isolation, not having the support, not having the financial things in place that would allow them to be able to take good care of themselves, not feeling like they can take care of themselves, feeling like they're not, what does this reflect about me if I get mental health services? What does this reflect about me if I let the church know I'm struggling? So I want you to speak a little bit on some of those things that pastors may be dealing with, about how do I create a support network and step outside of that pride of feeling like to do so and sometimes it may be because people have betrayed your trust. I won't always say that it's because you don't necessarily feel like you can ask for help, but maybe sometimes you've asked for things and you haven't been able to get them, and so you've stopped asking. But speak on that.
So I would say three things, and I'll expound on them just a little bit. First, we got to give people grace. People are human. They are going to fail. It is just nature. And I think if we can give grace, it helps to build a stronger foundation. We have an issue of building grace because we're so withdrawn sometimes that when you display, as one person said, when you show me who you are, I just believe you. Mm-hmm. And so, but that's not really their character. You got to start weighing it and really have some real conversations with yourself. Have they been there 90% of the time, and this 10% I've allowed to erase the 90? And if that's the case, I have some deacons that are phenomenal deacons, but I became withdrawn, not because of them, but because of who I am. The type of person, I'm an entrepreneur by nature. I've grew up in this thing. And so for me, I was one that once you show me you're not a part of the mission, I just drop it. Because the mission cannot be stopped. So I had to have some real conversation with myself and say, am I not giving grace? The second thing is, look at what you already have in your immediate circumference. Mm. A lot of times we have people that we can pour into, but because we're afraid that they're going to look at us different, we don't pour in. But the reason that they might be in your immediate area, your immediate view, is because they want to be there. You got to look at the folk that have chosen to be around you and not that you chose to be around. And here's the reason I say, there are some folk that we will get connected to because we just love the bravado. It's something that we might be lacking, but they don't have true companionship with you. And so you have to look at the folk that are surrounding you. My wife is one of my greatest resources. Now, as a pastor, I can't tell her everything because what I don't want, remember prioritizing, I don't want her to take some of that back to the church and view them differently. So I also looked at my pastor, and I'm a nagger when it comes to building my team. My pastor, I made sure that I connected with him. I sought out what he needed from a pupil so I could get what I needed from a mentor. Mm. And so a lot of times we're in danger and we want somebody to save us, but and I don't mean that in a negative way, but we're swimming, we're splashing around the water, and the reality is there's a life jacket, and if both of you use it, it can help. The mentor needs a pupil just as much as a pupil needs a mentor. And so looking in your immediate circumference. And the last thing is making sure that you hire. If you don't have you can't give grace. I understand. I've been there. Been lied on by some of the folk I trusted. I've been there. You can't give grace because you said it's not going to happen to me again. Your immediate view does not seem adequate. The last thing is, and I'm big on this, go hire somebody. Get you a therapist. And I don't mean that as a last effort. Sometimes that should be your first effort. And here's the reason why. It's a very practical reason. The reason why is because if I pay you, I can sue you if you put all my business out in the street. So at least I have somebody that I can hold accountable when I am trying to pour my heart out versus somebody that may let it slip. I don't take it always as people intentionally did me wrong.
Malice, yeah.
Yeah, and so hiring somebody, making sure that you have somebody that you can spend time with. And then there are so many free resources. Make sure that you do the research, because making sure you're able to expel some of the things you've been bottling up is one of the key things to get rid of that depression and to help you to see what you need to put in balance.
That's good stuff. Those are good recommendations. I appreciate that, because I do know that some people, one, they may not be in an area where there are a lot of other people that are options. It may be, like you said, a rural area that may not be a lot of connections, or maybe it's a family area, and most of these are, my family members, and I don't want to necessarily, you said, have church and family so connected that I cannot have a cutoff.
Yeah.
And so I may be looking, so maybe I can pursue that mentor outside of this area. And now with video technology and all of these things like this makes it much easier for us to be able to connect to people no matter where they are. But let's speak a little bit about the mental health piece. And I know this is a passionate area for you as well. You mentioned the depression. We know that depression and anxiety are probably the top two, some of the top two. Depression, anxiety, I would put grief in there. That pastors are dealing with regard to mental health. Talk a little bit about what are some of the challenges pastors may be facing that one can contribute to their mental health, having distress in their lives, having struggle in their lives. Two, what are some of maybe the things that prevent pastors from seeking mental health services? And three, what are maybe some of the factors that are playing into some of the hopelessness where pastors may get to that point of suicide?
Okay, so the first one I remember when that depressive moment happened, one of the things that got to me the most was, so I was on my way to bury my wife's grandfather when I got the call that my dad had passed. We had just left my dad the day before. I wanted to go back to the hospital. I don't know why I wanted to go back to the hospital, but I wanted to go back to the hospital. He was in a vegetative state. Nothing we really could have done, right? But I get the call at 6:00 p.m. that he has passed. I do not cry until I'm by myself. I was upset. I was mad. I didn't know what to do. Then while I'm at the house, some of the folk just question, why is it like he's not his usual self? Well, my dad just died, and my family understood, but just other folk, I just wanted to be withdrawn. I really didn't want to put on for anybody, right? And so I did not cry. I get a call that night at 10:00 p.m. that one of my beloved members died. And the family said, Pastor, we know you're grieving, but we would really love if you would do the funeral. I called my family in Detroit. My mom says, you're a pastor. I understand. Because people still got to come in and stuff, we're going to set it that this day is when we set it. I called the family. I drove back to Alabama from DC.
From DC.
Friend of mine helped pave the way. Drove back to DC. Buried the man. Tears in my eye, but I had to keep them because you can't be crying. This isn't your daddy, right? And I preached Sunday morning. I get done from preaching, And I get in the car and I drive home to Detroit, Michigan.
To bury your father.
To bury my father. And as I'm dealing with that, as we're going through the mental thing, it wasn't until about maybe, that was January 6th. Yeah, that was January 11th that we buried him. And I did not take a break until April. And my dad, my spiritual father, Pastor C.P. Noble, he was in the hospital at the same time fighting for his life. His appendix had burst, and I just didn't feel like I could talk to anybody. And so some of the dealing is we're still expected by the people to do business as usual. Even if they are looking for us to break down and show our humanity, the shows of expectation is that you're pastor. And so then if you don't show your brokenness, oh, he's trying to put on. I remember some of the comments I got, and it was like, man, I can't afford to let others see me broken. So it was one of my deacons, and I cherish him to this moment for it. He said, Pastor, you should take some time off. I probably went in on that Sunday or something, and I don't ever do that. And so he said, Pastor, you should take a couple weeks off. I think you should take a couple weeks off. I told them I was getting ready to already. He said, I think that's good, Pastor. You need a break. One of my other members, she said, Pastor, I was waiting. I just didn't know how long you were going to be able to handle it. So the first thing is the reason that it is problematic is because there's sometimes this superhuman expectation on pastor. I forget her name. I want to say it's Pastor Stewart out of Mississippi, not Mississippi, Memphis. Don't quote me. She's a part of IC3, but she was at, she was telling her story, and I remember her talk. She's a bishop, I do believe. If I'm wrong, please, y'all don't come at me. It's not intentional. She talks about the fact that she lost her baby while she was traveling here and there, going overseas, keeping all of the responsibilities. And so I was telling my wife, I said, the responsibility for us to take care of ourselves falls on both parties. But the reality is we as pastors carry a weight sometimes and carry a stigma that we are in it for the money. So because we're going through something, if I come and show you my brokenness in this moment, it may, in our minds, and I'm saying in our minds, I can't say that for the church, but in our minds, it may appear as if we've shown you enough weakness for you to attack. Because at the same time, I'm going through problems in my church. So if I show my weakness, and y'all are already putting, in my head, I'm like, y'all know my daddy done died. Y'all know Christina's grandfather done died. You know a member that I love has died. You know that, and I take my member's death personally. I said, you know that these folk have left us, and y'all are still putting me through hell. So who can I go to? And that's not all the church, but usually the more vocal ones are the ones that are causing the problem. And so what I would say is to the next part, what was the next question? So I make sure I get it right.
Okay, so the pride piece and why it's so difficult to find like a support system to ask for that help. And, you know, some of it is the mistrust, is some of it the that there's just not, you know, the space to be able to do that. But then that other piece of, you know, what are some of the things that are affecting my mental health?
Okay, so here it is. It's difficult because at the time, I'm hearing pastors that I've seen went through more than I did. I know a pastor who lost his wife in his arms. And I'm saying to myself, listen, your dad in his late 70s, like, this is going to happen. So some of your icons, you glamorize them as a pastor. So the pride comes in because you've seen others in your mind endure it and look like it not take them out. You feel like you can. Me and my wife often talk about when she dealt with postpartum. Postpartum wasn't the thing women talked about when she dealt with it. I was the one who noticed that something was off about her. I started making tangible efforts to try to address it. Now, I'm not no therapist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not even I'm a counselor, but not from the licensed perspective as of yet, right? And so I'm saying to myself, I'm just trying to make sure my wife is okay. And so one of the things she talks about, women, for the most part, you talk to moms, that's a part of it. Baby, I went through it.
Mm-hmm.
So for pastors, you hear the same thing. I went through it. Oh, Doc, I understand what you're going through. It's going to get better after a while. And so when we hear that, it makes us challenge, are we soft? Are we really not trusting God? So that's where the pride comes in. And I think, like I said, on the part where it makes it difficult for us to talk to people, some of the stuff that we're going through, we know is public. And even though some of our members, some of our people might be fighting privately for us, a lot of them don't address it publicly. So because they don't address it publicly, we don't feel there's no one fighting for us. And because we don't feel there's no one fighting for us, we feel as if you see what I'm going through and you've not made a tangible effort to help me, like if you see I'm drowning, I'm flapping, I'm ready, and you got a life raft in your hand. Now, what I don't know is that the life raft is anchored down to something. You're trying to break that life raft. I can't see that. You're not telling me I'm trying. I just see you there looking. I don't see you doing anything else. It makes me feel like I can't trust you.
Yeah.
So it makes me say, okay, I have to step back. I have to look at the situation from a different vantage point. Maybe I'm the problem. There were many times that I would talk to my wife. I said, what have I done wrong? And so, but in the healing, the last part is when I had people that I started looking for. And because I first addressed it with my home base, it made me start building outside of that. But I had to make sure the home base was taken care of first. And after that was taken care of, it was able to start putting the right people. So there are people now that when I'm at my lowest point, I will pick up the phone and call them. I always tell people, I'm friends to many, but only few are friends to me. So there's a core group that I will call and I'll say, man, I need you to be honest with me. And they'll tell me, Steve, this is you. This is your pride. This is this. And there's other times they'll say, man, listen, let's go get some food, and you can just rant.
Yeah. So talk to me coping skills, right? So this whole session today was about pastoral self-care. So we've run the gambit of, here are some of the things we're dealing with. Here are some of the misperceptions. Here are some of our own thoughts that have been fueled by what we've seen, maybe what we've been taught by others that don't allow us to be. But talk to me about all of these things that you've gone through, all of these things that you've seen, the things that you maybe said, I could have handled that different, because that was really dangerous, the driving back.
Yeah.
Right, like you put yourself at a lot of risk.
Yeah.
Right, and I know we're human beings and we can compartmentalize, and sometimes we take care of business because it allows us not to have to really grieve. But like that was really, really a dangerous trait for you. So as you think about all of the lessons you learned thus far, what would you say are some of the important aspects to self-care for pastors?
Okay, I got a few things and I'm not going to hold it long. Here it is. The first thing is give yourself grace. You are going to fail. You're not going to get everything right. I tell my church there's a God plan and then there's a Stephen idea. God's plan is not going to be persuaded. You're not going to shift me from God's plan. If I prayed about it, I know this is what the Lord wants me to do. I'm going to do that. But a Stephen idea, it's able to be adjusted and it's able to fail. I have to give myself grace. I am human. I am not always, they are looking for us to always have the right answer, but you will not always have the right answer. You're going to tell somebody to pray about it when you should have told them to go seek someone and talk to them about it. You're going to counsel and you're going to hold them longer than you should when you should have sent them somewhere else. You're going to spend a little bit more time and make someone more dependent on you than the word of God. These are things that we as pastors do. You're going to plan something, it's going to fall through, and it's okay. You got to give yourself grace. That's the first thing. The second thing is in coping skill, you remember the game tag?
Of course.
There was a safe zone in tag. Whenever you got to the safe zone, you knew everything. As long as you could make it to the safe zone, you were okay. Talk with your spouse about making your home a safe zone.
Oh, that's good.
And that should be for both parties. That should not just be for the spouse. There are times where my wife, she just needs to vent and I can't fix it. I got to take the pastor hat off and I have to be given permission to put the pastor hat back on. And it has to be a safe zone. I'm not okay and I just need you. When she is, we call them quarantine days. When there's those days and she don't feel like she's in the mood, I don't feel, hey babe, this is a quarantine day. I'm not coming at you. You not coming at me. Ain't got nothing to do. This is quarantine day. Things are not going like I want them to. Create a safe zone. Make sure that your spouse is invested in your safe zone and reaps the benefits of your safe zone. You cannot be down all the time. And this is what I mean. If I notice that I'm spending a little too much time in pity party, my wife is allowed to come to me and just push me to talk about it. That is an agreement we've made. You're on your 5th day not talking to nobody. We need you. She gets to push me and pride until I break open. Sometimes it's nothing. But because we created that safe zone, I understand if I have to deal with business and it's stressful, I get back home. It's my safe zone. Every night every time we have a church meeting, she has a phenomenal dinner cooked. Whenever she has her Mom and Fine conference, I make sure she gets a bouquet of flowers, something to let her know that she's cared for, and she gets the rest when she comes back. There's a safe zone that we've developed. And I think the last thing, but it might be the most important thing out of all of that, not just giving yourself grace, not just making sure you have a safe zone, because some preachers do not have a spouse.
Right. There was a question about loneliness in there.
Yeah. So you're dealing with that loneliness. I think knowing God loves you just as much. You do not have to live as a martyr or as a pauper to enjoy your life. So this year, me and my wife, a few years ago, we were talking. She has developed this phenomenal for-profit out of her pain, out of her struggle. One day she said, well, babe, why don't you do this? I said, one of the issues I deal with is I'm the funder and I don't have anyone to fund me. And she said, what do you mean? She was like, baby, you know I'm there to support you. I said, I didn't say you wouldn't support. You're phenomenal. I tell my wife all the time, she is superwoman as far as I'm concerned. Phenomenal supporter. But if my wife needs a little bit extra or the bills got to, that's a worry she never had to deal with for the most part. And so she was talking to me, Lord had been talking to me about stepping away from the barbershop. And I was telling her, I said, I'm not going to do it unless you stand in agreement with it. And so she was like, she prayed about it and she was quick to say, I think you should. I still didn't want to do it because as a provider, I'm like, listen, I've never been on someone else's time. She said, you're not. There's other opportunities. You're speaking way more. You are having all these other opportunities opening up for you. Why not just step out? I just didn't want to do it. It wasn't until she came to me and said, don't you think you're deserving of going after your dream? And for me, my dream was always centered around the church. I didn't want to pastor. I love preaching, but I never wanted to pastor. And so I felt, oh, now that God has called me to a pastor, I'm supposed to be a full-time pastor, do this, do this, do this. And so when I stepped away, I just knew God was getting ready to enlarge territory somehow. I didn't know what it was going to be. It was going to be at Bethlehem. They were going to surprise me, do all this stuff. Or the Lord was getting ready to just let my speaking blow up. Well, first couple of months, God blessed heavy. I'm talking about every bill was paid for months in advance because of open opportunities. Then the struggles came. And my wife stepped up in ways, and I'm still bringing in income, but my wife stepped up in ways that I never expected. She said, I want you to go after your dreams as well. And so recently I took on something that I love to do. I took on a position as a fatherhood coordinator here in Montgomery, Alabama. Well, it's something I'm excited about. It is something that I already do. I work with men on being more present fathers, taking care of their mental health, but it doesn't require me to give up my speaking and leadership responsibility. So I'm like, Lord, can I do this? Like, I was wrestling with it. Can I do this and this? And nowhere in the text does it tell me that I have to just leave this. That this passion he gave me for working with men has to be solely invested in the church. And I think many of us as pastors, we look at bivocational work as a means to pastor, where I would disagree and say bivocational can just be something you enjoy to do. You can love what you do and not have to carry the weight of, and if people have to make some adjustments, then they have to make adjustments. I sat down with my deacons. I said, listen, I'm not going to be going to as many meetings as I used to. We'll need some of y'all to step up. We're going to have to move this aside. We're going to have to push this a little bit later. Why? Because as your pastor, I have a responsibility to take care of my family, but I also have to want to have joy. And so understanding that you do not have to die to this. You might have to sacrifice some, you might have to surrender some things, but you don't have to die. You don't have to be a shell of yourself to actually pastor. And your people are going to be made all the better by you taking time, by you setting and planning structure. And here's the last thing, making sure that, because we have some full-time pastors, I don't have to go, but I have a hectic schedule on me. And I understand that too. I know a pastor who for 7 straight years never took a vacation.
Oh my.
Never took a vacation. Other people came in to preach, but he never took a vacation. And I asked him why. He said, well, Reverend, I can't, what happens if I'm not in the pulpit? I said, the same thing that's going to happen if you die. It's going to keep moving on. He said, Reverend, I said, man, so you telling me that you have not spent no time away on a beach with your wife? And he said, Garrett, don't talk to me like that. Why you say that to me? I said, ask your wife how much she'd enjoy. I said, I bet you she won't even believe you'll take her. Sure enough, she said, she was like, we'll never go on that.
Oh,
she had settled with that type of lifestyle. I said, listen, just talk to your deacons. And if they have a problem, I said, just don't show up. Have everything in place. He said, Doc, I said, if your church is willing to vote you out, your whole church willing to vote you out so you're caring for your family, I said, you don't need to be at that church. I said, that's not the place. I said, and we have to trust, here it is, that God loves us just as much as he loves them. Dr. Tyshawn Gardner told me that, and it released me. Preacher, God loves you just as much as he loves them. You are his child too. So I said to myself, you're right. I actually do get to spend time with my family and build that up as I'm encouraging them to spend time with their family. And so make sure you start setting that up. If you're a new pastor, talk to your church early about sabbatical. You ain't got to take a whole month, take 2 weeks. Listen, paid sabbatical. That's not your vacation time. I said sabbatical. And you tell them as you are doing, and I counsel pastors, but I tell them as you're doing this, explain to them they are being made the better for the time. You don't get to plan the agenda for the year. You don't get to vision cast when you're always dealing with the current problem. And so when you're able to take that time, you're able to center yourself with the Lord and see what he wants for you to do. And you're not just dealing with chaos. And here's the next thing. While you're on that sabbatical, there's only certain folk that are allowed to call you. Those emergency contacts. I tell pastors, you better get you a burner phone. Cut the other phone off. If they not, the only folk that got that number are the folk that need to have that number. And so that way, you know that when I get this call, it is vital. It's important. I'll say this and I'll stop. I got a call. I used to fret it. And one night I got that call, get a call super late at night. My heart would start pacing. So now, and I still have that issue. I got a call one super late. I just knew something was wrong because my family doesn't call me at a certain time. I lost someone. That time, when I get those type of midnight calls, my heart paces. So I put my phone on sleep mode. My wife's phone is not on sleep mode. So here's what happens. If my family needs to get in touch, they have my wife's phone. But nobody can get in touch with me without being able, and I have a church phone. So my deacons can get in touch. If something happens in the midnight hour, they can get in touch with me. But you cannot get in touch with me on my personal phone unless it's within a certain amount of time. And you got to set those boundaries and those structures.
Well, Reverend Garrett, we thank you so much for sharing this wisdom about pastoral self-care. How can the people get in touch with you? I know you got a podcast, share with people how they can access.
So our podcast is, there's several ways you can access me. We took a break from our podcast for the last few months, really just getting some structural things together, getting new equipment, stuff like that. But we are getting ready to come back out come September, getting everything together. I'll be still going live, but here's the ways you can catch me. You can find me on the Pulpit View on YouTube. We have a membership, not a paid membership, but we have a group for pastors called the Pulpit View in Facebook. If you search it, you'll find it. Then you can always get in contact with me at Stephen Garrett on Facebook, Pastor Stephen Garrett on Facebook, and Stephen_K_Garrett at on Instagram. And so those are my major ways of getting in contact with me. And if you message me, I do reply back. I'm always looking for brothers to help. And the Pulpit View community is directly for men, because for us, a lot of times our family structure is the most out of order. Women really don't have a choice not to put some things in place because they carry the children. We, on the other hand, a lot of times we have to slow ourselves down. So we really are trying to build up stronger men in the body of Christ. So we want to walk with you. So if you want to, please connect with us. We'd be excited to have you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Garrett. It's always a pleasure to have you. I appreciate you sharing of your wisdom and your information and just your transparency. Because I think there were some pastors who tuned in and was like, oh, you speaking my story. We can say this out loud? Okay, right. So thank you so much for giving of yourself and for walking in your calling. Everyone, you will continue to see great presenters such as Reverend Garrett on the show this month as we're getting into the series. So Tuesday, August 8th, so that's next Tuesday, Elder Lavisha Williams will be here to talk about getting back to self after loss. On the 15th, Bishop Julian Lott getting back to being non-judgmental. Going to your grace piece there, Pastor. Apostle Sybil Sloan, getting back to your purpose, will be on the 22nd, and on the 29th, Dr. Sean Cook, getting back to inspiration. As always, thank you all for joining. You know, you can reach Tea Time with Dr. Tarver on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and your favorite listening platforms. You have a wonderful evening, Reverend Gary. You take good care and take care of yourself so you can get over the cold you got going on.
Thank you.
All right, sir. Good night.
Have a good one. You too.